If you feel like you've been losing at the game of capitalism and you keep getting stomped under its boot, this episode is for you. I'm going to talk about the attitudes that you would have heard if you had grown up in a wealthier household, which very few of us actually have. But that's why this podcast, How to Be an Adult, exists. Just a quick note that the information in this episode is for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not financial advice. Welcome to How to Be an Adult, a podcast created by the team at the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis in Toronto, Canada. We offer practical guidance for people just like you who've inadvertently become adults and don't know what to do about it. Whether you're 18 or 80, this show is the trail guide to life that you should have received when you gained equality with your parents, but didn't. We share our thoughts in public to democratize self-love and self-respect and self-assurance, and everything that we believe shouldn't just be the domain of the privileged. I'm Luke Chow. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about winning attitudes for succeeding at capitalism. I'm going to preface this entire episode by saying that the reason I'm talking about how to win at capitalism is that's what I've been trying to do since I became an adult myself. If the events of my early life had gone very differently, I'd be speaking to you in Mandarin and talking about how to become a good member of the Chinese Communist Party. Because if that's the system that I am thrust into and then have to get good at, then that's the system I would have figured out during all my working years. Instead, the system I've had to figure out and get good at my entire working life is this free market, liberal, democratic, capitalist system we have in Canada and that we have in the United States and that we have in most of the Western world. There are plenty of better qualified authorities who will tell you how to save, which investments to pick, how to allocate your investment portfolio, and how to calculate when you're able to retire. The role I'm going to play for you is the role I play for my clients, and that's to determine and then to communicate ideal mindsets for the circumstances you're in. So today we're going to talk about how to win at capitalism. And at this point, I have to define my terms. Capitalism is this system of private property and individuals or privately owned corporations owning the means of production. So if you want to start a sticker making company, and as part of that company, you accumulate enough seed capital or money from your parents or from your friends, and then you buy a very fancy sticker maker, well, the money that you have to invest in your business is capital. The sticker maker is capital. Capital is a term derived from the word head or head of cattle. It used to be, and in some places in the world it still is, that if you have a massive herd of cattle, you had a lot of capital. And your heads of cattle would be able to produce for you milk and calves, and at slaughter, beef. So if you own a pet cow and you never monetize your cow and you just love your cow, the cow isn't capital. But if you own a cow and the cow produces something of value to others, then that cow is capital. If you have a piggy bank and you're saving up some money to buy a new pair of sneakers, that's not capital. But if you have a piggy bank and you're saving up to start a new business by buying perhaps some camera equipment so you can do some videography, then that piggy bank is capital. So capital is it's money or it's assets that will make money for you. When I say winning at capitalism, what I mean is that over a lifetime, when you work hard enough, when you save enough, eventually our society permits you to have accumulated enough capital that the capital produces income for you. and you no longer have to work for wages or for fees or for commissions. That's the condition we call retirement. We hope that our grandparents accumulate enough millions of dollars of capital that they don't have to work beyond the age of 60 or 70. We hope that our parents accumulate enough capital that when they're 55, when they're 65, they're able just to live off the money that they had made and invested earlier in life. My wish for you is that you also accumulate enough capital during the working years of your life so that later on in life, perhaps when it's more difficult to work for wages, your capital produces income for you, and you won't have to use the sweat of your brow to produce income. So when I talk about winning at capitalism, I'm not talking about screwing people over or somehow backstabbing Jeff Bezos. I'm talking about adapting very well to the economic system you exist in, where it is possible for you to one day have enough capital that you don't have to work for a living. We call that retirement. Here I'm calling it winning at capitalism. Whatever you call it, it's this capitalist society that permits private ownership of capital, that makes it so you can, over a lifetime, accumulate all this capital and have it make money for you. I know a lot of you might be 20, 25, 30, and at these ages, you don't have much capital. So you look at someone who's 60, who's 70, they've had a lifetime to accumulate capital. But the main difference between you and them is the year you were born in. If you were born earlier, if you were born in 1950, like perhaps your parents or your grandparents, then you also would have had a decades-long timeline on which to accumulate capital, on which to purchase some real estate. But future generations will not have to envy you because you started in the 2020s, let's say. And you do not have to envy your parents' generation because they started in, say, the 1980s or the 1990s. The society that we live in, if we remain a free market capitalist society, and I honestly don't see a communist revolution coming to Canada or the US anytime soon, this system is one where we all can be winners. The reason I decided to make this episode is I do have rather leftist affiliations at times, and it frustrates me to no end when very good, well-meaning, compassionate people believe that they must, under our current system, somehow end up a loser. I don't want that fate for you. You're listening to my podcast. I want you to win at capitalism. I want you to accumulate enough capital that you can retire one day. The rest of this episode gives you some attitudes and perspectives so that you have the right orientation for seeing how. If there is going to be class warfare, if it's going to be the rich versus the poor, I want you on the winning side. Again, this is because you're listening to my podcast. I want my clients to be on the winning side of whatever their endeavors are. I want my listeners to be on the winning side of whatever their endeavors are, and I want myself to be on the winning side of whatever endeavors I'm on. And if I'm going to be a small business owner, which for 19 years I have been, then I owe it to myself, I owe it to my clients, and I owe it to my employees, my landlord, and all of my suppliers to win at capitalism so everyone benefits. First and foremost, to win at capitalism, you have to become a member of the capital-owning class. Now, in a place like Canada and the US, there is class mobility. We could argue the fine-grained details about how much, but I have seen myself and the members of my closest family go from poverty to something far better than poverty. And we are first-generation immigrants. So it's not like there's this pool of capital like the Irvings or the Westons or the Thompsons that has grown and compounded year after year. My parents kind of started from scratch. My sister started from scratch, and I started from scratch. And all of us are doing pretty well these days. But we didn't do it by accident. We did it because we valued things that I'm going to kind of share with you as valuable. And we thought less of things that I would suggest are not conducive to your accumulation of capital. So, for example, investing in things like education or real estate, my family saw as worthwhile. Spending money on very expensive automobiles or very expensive vacations, we saw as a worthless expenditure. If you have an upbringing that gives you these kinds of values, then, well, obviously, in adulthood, you might skimp on consumer goods in order to splurge on investment products. If, however, you grew up and everyone was very consumptive, you might skimp on investment products to splurge on consumer goods, and that's antithetical to winning at capitalism. Those who look at our society and assess that it's not a level playing field are absolutely right. Those who look at our society and they think, well, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, they are absolutely right. It's not a level playing field. But we do have class mobility. So you owe it to yourself to play this game well. If the odds are stacked against those who have to work for a living and who own no capital, if the odds are stacked for those who don't have to work for a living and who make their income through capital, then you owe it to yourself to become a capitalist, to accumulate capital, to have some of your own, to even have a lot of your own, so that you can play a winning game. Part of my message is that you don't have to compromise your values to do this. In fact, I don't think very highly of those who practice capitalism in an exploitative or in an unethical way. I just don't think they have to. So if they are, I think less of them. But that's not the amorality of capitalism. Capitalism, it is amoral. It basically is an economic framework. It's not a moral framework. It's the amorality of the people practicing it. The human beings who engage in any kind of practice have to be the ones applying ethics and morality and principles, because we are the ones who are in possession of ethics and morals and principles. This free market system has no conscience, it has no heart, it has no mind. It has to be the human beings practicing this system who apply their morals and their principles. So to climb up the social ladder, as soon as you can, you want to start converting some of your labor into capital. In other words, you want to take some of the wages that you earn, or some of the fees or the commissions or the tips that you earn, and put it into some kind of investment product. It could be an ETF, it could be stocks, it could be bonds if you were very, very, very conservative. It could even be a high-interest savings account. And that's your first foray into becoming a member of the capital-owning class. If you have even just a few shares in Apple or any of your favorite companies, you are a member of the capital-owning class, admittedly on a small scale, but you're already a burgeoning capitalist. And you are benefiting from the rise of the stock market, the economic productivity of Tim Cook and his team of executives and the team of probably well over 100,000 employees, and they are working to help make money for you. So when you're a member of the capital-owning class, which we all can be, just buying a few shares on the stock market, then others labor so that we can benefit. Just like when we work and we get paid our wages or fees or salary or whatever, we work and the shareholders benefit. One of the great things about class mobility is that not being stuck in the class you're born into. So let's say you're born into a family with no wealth. If you live below your means, you will accumulate wealth And you could potentially pass that wealth down to your children or your nieces and nephews. And they start life a member of the capital owning class. Now, in so much of what I do, I am not really trying to change minds or alter anything in this world. I'm just trying to describe any map of the world that suggests it's too hard for you to join the capital owning class is going to delay or maybe even impede your eventual retirement. You have to see yourself as someone who has class mobility, and irrespective of the station of your birth, you're able, even if working for wages for decades, you're able to accumulate capital of your own that's under your private possession, and which, when it generates income or when it can be sold for a higher price, the profits go to you. Because that's what retirement is. It's the reward at the end of having worked enough to have accumulated enough that your capital makes money for you and you no longer have to be the person who's making money through wages. To win at capitalism, you have to be a master of capital. You cannot be a slave to it. There's the so-called almighty dollar, and we could imagine some finance bro completely abandons his humanity to worship the almighty dollar. And to me, that's a total inversion of the natural order, which I'm going to describe to you. If we create an order of the universe from most intelligent and capable and feeling and perceptive to least intelligent, capable, feeling, and perceptive, we have us human beings at the top, right? We have like maybe animals beneath us or alongside with us. And then we'll have like fungi and plants and trees, as alive, but less perceptive apparently than the animals are. And at the very bottom, we have like rocks, we have minerals, we have metals, including metals very artfully arranged in the shape of our devices and technologies. And well, that's a hierarchy from most conscious to least conscious. Capital is literally at the bottom of this hierarchy. So for a human being who has consciousness, who can make decisions, who can feel, who can think, who has foresight if they dare to use it, to then subjugate all of that to this invention of humankind, to this sticker machine, right? That to me it's a ridiculous inversion of the natural order. I so often have to tell my clients who work in finance that they have intrinsic value that's priceless, not worthless. Okay, their boss values their intrinsic worth as nothing, but their parents don't, their friends don't, their cat or dog doesn't make the mistake their boss makes. They have priceless, incalculably high intrinsic value. And then whatever they generate economically is plus $250,000 a year, plus a few million a year. Whatever that is, it's closer to worthless and priceless. So us human beings, I am positing, are at the top of the natural hierarchy. We're priceless by default. We're not worthless. Capital's like among cell phones and rocks and cars and lampposts. It's one of those things that we've just invented in order to make our society a little better, in order to organize things a little better. It should never be our master. We, thinking, decision-making human beings who can make ethical decisions, should always be at the top. And then the things we invent should be subjugated to us. And capital is among those things we invent that I would suggest should be subjugated to us. I use my tools. I do not permit my tools to gain authority or control over me. Often just as a hypnotherapist, I have to talk people out of being afraid of airplanes, for example. But airplanes are just another example of this technology, this tool we've invented so we never ever have to ride horseback to cross a mountain range. We don't have to take a wooden boat to cross the Atlantic. We can just safely fly over the whole thing. And it's an inversion of the natural order when a human being is afraid of his or her own tools and technologies. So I would suggest that you can also become a master of capital and be fearless of capital. It has no thoughts of its own. It has no mind of its own. It's this dead, inert thing that exists for us to use, to understand, to deploy at will, and to our own ends. Here's what I mean by becoming a master of capital. It goes hand in hand with being unintimidated by it. A lot of the people who are listening are going to have very powerfully emotional, whether fearful or perhaps greedy, feelings when large sums of money get brought up. And in that case, you aren't necessarily making rational decisions. If someone can promise riches and it gets you to put money into a scam, well, then you've lost control. If you think that you must spend money immediately as soon as it enters your bank account because you can't be trusted to keep it in your bank account, you are, in my terms, a slave, not a master of the money that you could turn into capital if you bought investment products instead of consumer goods. We all have our reasons for being emotional around money. And fear and greed, famously, are the two worst emotions to feel as an investor. Because if you're too fearful, then you miss out on opportunities. If you're too greedy, you think something's an opportunity and it's not at all an opportunity, and then you risk losing your shirt. So you want to be someone who deploys capital because you assess the opportunity is a good one through a level-headed calculation. If you're spending money, whether on a bad investment or on a consumer good, because you feel like you have to or else you're going to miss out, or because everyone else is doing it, or because you don't trust yourself to hold on to the money, or you don't believe that you're worth having 5 figures in your bank account and you're going to lose it for sure. If those are your thought processes, which it won't be for most of you, but will be for some of you, then you want to study as much as you can about personal finance, or even just the financial markets, because it's through knowledge that you become a master of capital and you don't become subjugated to it. Just like if you study how to drive a car, then the same vehicle that scares the unknowledgeable driver makes the knowledgeable driver feel very capable and very confident of getting their way. So when I think about money these days, it's not something that makes me feel lacking or less than or more than others. Money it's a tool invented by us human beings to organize our society so that if the cobbler doesn't need bread, so let's say the cobbler is gluten-free, the cobbler can still sell his shoes. The baker just pays with money and then gets that money from someone who does eat bread and who does digest gluten. So money allows us to do better than a barter economy. Sometimes growing up in this capitalist ideological system, we kind of lose sight of the fact that money is not this natural thing. Money didn't used to exist. It was invented by human beings. And human beings have been learning how to use it. And it still is an invention, even if it permeates so much of our lives. But our cell phones are just an invention. We don't have to be slaves to our cell phones. We don't have to respond to every notification ding. We human beings are the thinkers, the decision makers, the feelers. We should use our tools, whether a cell phone or a car or an airplane or a few $1,000,000, to serve our needs. To win at capitalism, you need an internal locus of control. That's a term from psychology. That means you believe you are at cause for things that happen in your life. If you have an external locus of control, you believe that other people or circumstances or fate are at cause for the things that happen in your life. In reality, it's a little bit us and a little bit the world around us. It's not so simple as to say we're responsible for everything. It's also not so simple as to say we're responsible for nothing. It's a little bit of each. But the bias toward believing that you are at cause for the things that happen in your life permits you to be looking for a better way forward. So if you believe that you are at cause for present circumstances of not having saved up very much money, and then you shall be at cause for future circumstances where you have saved up money and you've invested some of that money and you've seen a return on your capital, then you're going to take the steps necessary to open up a brokerage account and to research some investments, and then put some of the money that you've been saving into those investments. And then fast forward a few years, you're a newly minted capitalist, and you've gotten a return on that capital. If you have an external locus of control, if you blame your upbringing, if you blame your parents for not showing you how to buy stocks, if you blame the economic system we live in, you may never take the actions necessary to begin joining the capital-owning class. And that's what I want to prevent at all costs for those listening to this episode today, because I adapted to this world. And I want you to adapt to this world. I want everyone you love one day to have so much capital they can retire. I think we all can do that. I think we all should do that. And I think that when people don't, it's true that sometimes it is just misfortune. Sometimes it is just misfortune. We should have social safety nets. And other times, one is very fortunate, but doesn't take the actions that entered them into the capital-owning class. And they will fall behind because of the world we live in. And that's the worst-case scenario that I want to prevent for you. Whenever you feel helpless or despondent around money, the question to ask yourself is, what can I do? Where is my glass half full? What are the ingredients out of which I can make the rest of today? And then your attention starts to go to what you do have, to where you can access some capital, even if it's a line of credit or a credit card or your uncle. But when you start thinking that there must be something you can do, the thoughts that follow subsequently are plausible candidates for what you end up doing. It's only when you start thinking that you can't do anything, that's when your mind is devoid of any possible candidate futures that you could start moving toward. And that kind of leads to the next point, which is to win at capitalism, you have to be an optimist. Every investor puts hard-earned money into the investment because they believe that given a long enough timeline, they're going to see their capital returned times some multiple. That's the thing that gets them to part with their money. Without that optimism, why don't we just spend like there's no tomorrow? But we don't spend like there's no tomorrow, where we believe that the future can be better if we invest today. The entrepreneur will labor maybe 120 hours a week, sleep on the floor of their office, sacrifice their social life. Why? Because they're an optimist. Because they believe that when they put in that work, when they take the chances, then on a long enough timeline, they're going to have the successful company that finally, after some number of years, will be recognized by others as a valuable contribution to our society. But they have to have the vision first. They have to believe in the vision first. They have to be an optimist. Even me as a podcaster, I'm sitting here in an office that costs rent every month, and it's set up exclusively as this podcast set. I have staff in this office and the next one who are being paid by the hour. So money is being spent as I am sitting here filming this podcast, and as they go through the footage, and as they edit the footage, and as we release the episode. Why? Because I believe that if I put in this effort, if I put in this time, if I put in this money, if I invest this capital into producing podcast episodes, then on a long enough timeline, there's going to be a return. It is out of optimism that with no one paying me a single thing, and me paying quite a lot, I am making this episode anyway. And honestly, I believe I'm right. I believe that after enough episodes, after the listenership gets high enough, there is definitely going to be a return on this podcast. So whether you're an investor, an entrepreneur, even a content creator, optimism is the thing that gets you to do the hard things. Knowing, feeling in your bones that it's probably worthwhile. It doesn't even have to be guaranteed. It just has to be probably worth it. Our world, especially the better aspects of the world today, was not created by those who sought to find fault with the plans of others. The beautiful artwork and music and films that we can enjoy today were all created by optimists. They were funded by optimists where funding was needed. So to win at capitalism, to participate in this society that rewards people, you have to be an optimist. To win at capitalism, you need to take a positive-sum mindset. And that's in contrast with the zero-sum mindset that we'll hear from an entire range of people, from Donald Trump to many people who are on the left. Now, the zero-sum mindset suggests that if one person is wealthy, they must have impoverished another to have obtained their wealth, that it wouldn't be possible for the wealthy person to have created wealth out of nothing. The positive-sum mindset suggests that the wealth created by, let's say, a painter or an entrepreneur or a tech mogul, that it's in addition to the wealth created by everyone else working in the economy. This positive-sum view is what actually corresponds with the rising global GDP that I've seen my entire life. Over my life, I have seen extreme poverty in China, in India, in sub-Saharan Africa decline to, in some countries, almost nothing. And us here in the rich world are not that worse off just because over 1 billion people in India are better off. I know that if you listen a lot to either Donald Trump or some people on the left as well, you believe that someone must be impoverished for someone else to be wealthy. It's quite a popular view in public discourse that wealth is zero-sum. But why then has the reduction in global poverty not taken from those of us in the rich world? It's because the Chinese and the Indians, the Nigerians, are inventing things of their own. They are adding to the wealth that exists in this world. Our economy is a positive-sum game. So I'm going to use this analogy. Let's say I'm a painter, right? A fine art painter. And I take $50 of canvas, and I take $100 of various colors of oil paint. I take a paintbrush worth $10. And I start mixing up my paints and artfully applying brush strokes onto canvas. After a few days' work, I have a completed piece that might sell for, let's say, $2,000. Now, when a nice young couple comes to buy that painting for their first condo, they pay me $2,000, though I only spent less than $200 to produce the painting. Now, have I ripped them off to the tune of $1,800? Or have I created, through the sweat of my brow, through the labor that transforms raw materials into some finished product, have I actually just created that much wealth that didn't previously exist? I would suggest that the second explanation, that the painter literally just created that wealth, is the accurate one, just like the Chinese and the Indians and the Nigerians are creating wealth through their economic activity elsewhere in the world. Just like a hypnotherapist over here is creating wealth through his economic activity here in this world. If one day that painter has an entire warehouse full of paintings that in aggregate could be sold for $16 million, then good on him, because he was very productive. He's created that much extra beauty in this world. And each of his customers would rather have a part of that beauty he's created than, $2,000, $3,000, $16,000. To win at capitalism, you have to see the beauty in voluntary transactions. See, no one ever has to buy a painting, right? We're fine without any original oil painting behind the living room couch. But people buy paintings, me included, because we'd rather have that beautiful, colorful thing to bring us joy or peace than $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 extra in a bank account, right? I often joke, humble brag, that I move air with my mouth for a living, which I'm doing right now. But my clients pay me because they would much rather listen closely to what I have to say about their problems than to have an extra 1,000 or 2 or 3 sitting around in their bank account while they haven't heard what I have to say. In your discretionary spending, every transaction where you're paying money that you don't have to, so you have enough pairs of shoes, but you're going to buy a new pair of shoes anyway, you do it because you'd rather have the thing than the extra dollars. That's why you do it. And if you run a business or if you work the till at some shop, you receive money not because the customer's being held at gunpoint. You receive money because the customer would rather have the thing you're selling than the extra dollars in their wallet or their bank account. And that's how these transactions happen. And these transactions happen over and over again, every split second, all around the world. And that's our capitalist free market economy. The painter wins, and that young couple with the new condominium wins. When I have a new client, they win, I win. So the zero-sum mentality where someone's got to be a loser, it's not just toxic. It's just plainly incorrect modeling of how our economy, how our society actually works. In my view, when capitalism is working correctly, there are no losers. The example of the painter leads to my next point, which is that to win at capitalism, you have to create something that is of value to this world. It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be an idea, it could be connections. It could even be that you're an arbitrageur and you just even out prices between two different discrepant markets. But to win at capitalism, you have to do something of value for this world. And that's how people voluntarily would rather have your thing than the extra dollars in their bank account. To win at capitalism, you have to understand how the laws of supply and demand affect prices. And that includes the price of labor if you work for wages. So early in my career, I was a very new hypnotist. I was 23 years old. I rented out my office, but so what? Many people rented out offices during that long before the pandemic time. And back then, my fees were much lower. I believe I started at $100 a session, and this was in 2006. And as my career progressed, I became a scarcer commodity. Because once I cross over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of working experience, there are fewer and fewer people who can make the claim that they have as much experience. Once I also become a visible face on YouTube or on Instagram, there are fewer people with X years of experience and are a visible face on social media, where you could vet their thoughts and ideas before you even call their office. Post-pandemic, there are even fewer people renting out permanent office space. My fees in 2025 are 4 or 5 times higher than they were in 2006, but people are paying it. And they're paying it because they cannot get what I offer at a lower price. They can get a new practitioner, they can get someone who works online only, they can get someone where the ideas they're about to espouse are not quite known. But if they want everything that I offer, it's really only me, at least here in Toronto, who exists at the center of that Venn diagram. I'm telling you this not to brag. I'm telling you this so that you can maneuver yourself in a very similar position in your career. You don't want to be in a position where the work you're doing could be replicated by someone who works cheaper, or worse, could be replicated by AI, because a rational employer would choose the cheaper option on a long enough timeline. You want to be in a position where no one else stands at the confluence of all your skill and all your knowledge and all your insight and everything else that you have. Just like I've maneuvered myself into this position where if you want a hypnotherapist who meets certain criteria, you're coming here. A surgeon who has a reputation for performing one very specialized surgery and who's done enough of those operations to be considered the best in the world is going to be able to charge much higher fees than a general surgeon, and people will fly to pay those higher fees rather than seeing Dr. So-and-so in Cleveland. A lot of younger people, I find, are drawn to glamorous occupations where there's always going to be someone willing to do the same work or better work at a lower cost. And that's going to make it very tough for you to be making good fees, wages, or commissions if someone else can do the same or better work at a lower cost. You'd be literally uncompetitive in the market. So sometimes the best opportunities are the underappreciated ones. So many people told me, don't become a hypnotherapist. This profession honestly has a very bad reputation, apparently. If you survey the average person, if you look at an aggregate public sentiment toward hypnotherapy, it doesn't have a great reputation. If you talk to our clients, the perceptions will be very different. If you talk to people who've really done their research, the perceptions will be different as well. But that also permits me to one day become the best or the best known or the best respected of all hypnotherapists, at least in the English-speaking world. If I became a surgeon, I'd be a decent but probably average surgeon. There's going to be a lot of very intelligent, hardworking, capable people in the surgical field. If I became a lawyer on a long enough timeline, I can probably make partner. But I'm probably not going to be a world-class lawyer. But here I am talking about becoming a world-class hypnotherapist. Just like there are fewer people working in waste disposal because it's kind of filthy. There are fewer people working in hypnotherapy, which means that those who put a serious effort into these underappreciated opportunities are going to be able to grow their businesses with less serious competition. To win at capitalism, you have to live below your means. You have to make more money than you are spending, because that difference is what you save or invest. That difference adds to your pile of capital that eventually becomes what produces income for you instead of wages. If you spend more than you make, or if you spend as much as you make, that pile of capital never grows. And then you're a wage earner for the rest of your life. Now, I know this is easier said than done. So here's my second point. To win at capitalism, you have to play offense, not defense. You can't save a lot of money when you don't earn a lot of money in the first place. You have to earn a lot of money in the first place to be able to save a lot of money. To explain what I mean by playing offense, I'm going to use the example of my own business. So for many years of my life, I was still sort of like in this poverty mentality that is the artifact of my upbringing. For the first many years of my practice, I try to keep costs low. I try to minimize rent costs, advertising costs, wages, and so on, so that I could make as much profit as I could from some meager amount of top-line income. So for the first 10 years of my practice, I took home about $30,000 a year. More recently, after surviving the pandemic, I started getting bolder, thinking, okay, if a global pandemic is not going to kill this practice, probably there's nothing else on the horizon that's much of an existential threat. So I upgraded my office space. I increased headcount. We are spending more on ads. And we're making more money than ever. Now, the reason for this is that generally, people don't really want the cheapest hypnotherapist. People want a good hypnotherapist who's trustworthy and reputable and well-established and knowledgeable and confident. So by keeping costs low, I was often giving people a frazzled hypnotherapist. I was giving them a very small space to sit in post-pandemic where I'm worried if they cough. And then if they do cough, the droplets could land on my face, and then I'm out of commission for the next 1 or 2 weeks. Once I started spending more money in this business, well, now I don't care if people cough because they're safely distanced. I'm talking to them from across a rather cavernous space. Nowadays, I have more staffing, which means we can do more things like this podcast and then reach more people. And of course, when advertising is well spent, then the advertising produces a positive return. And the more you spend on advertising, the more people end up becoming your clients. I know this is an example of a business where increasing the top line has produced more profit. And it's true that my expenses went up a lot. My rent quintupled. But I'm telling you this example because it's a recent first-hand example where that calculation had paid off. In something that's more like a household, it won't be increasing your square footage in your home. My square footage is commercial space. You could say it's capital. It's not just a discretionary expense. In your household, it might be that you do some gig work. It might be that you negotiate a compensation structure that gives you a profit share or an equity share. It might be that you upgrade your skills so that on the free market, employers are seeking you and there aren't enough of you, so they have to bid up your wages. You want to put yourself in this position where you're increasing what you're able to offer to the world and then collecting more money from a world that's happy to shove money into your hands. That's the better way to live below your means relative to being stuck in a low-paying job and then trying to save. I mean, saving is important, but saving is so much easier when you have more income coming in the first place. Here's my last point for how to win at capitalism. You have to respect people who are already good at capitalism. Because if you hate or disrespect or morally judge people who are winning the game that I'm telling you, I want you to win, then there's always going to be cognitive dissonance. That makes it very hard for you to play a really good game. And if you're going to play a really good game, well, you have to admire the winners. That does not mean you need to respect or admire, I'll just say, Elon Musk or Larry Ellison. It means you could respect and admire Warren Buffett. It means you can respect and admire Mackenzie Scott rather than her ex-husband, Jeff Bezos. You could respect and admire Oprah Winfrey. Pick your heroes. That's your choice. But among all people who've more than won at capitalism, you can find examples of people who you personally would want to emulate. And you do not have to ever imagine you're going to turn into Elon Musk just because you've made your first $10 million. One thing I've discovered about wealth and the wealthy is that wealth is an amplifier. Whatever personality traits, whatever pet causes you have when you don't have money, then get amplified once you do have money. So, like, if I don't have money, I might just go to the art gallery and walk around. If I do have money, well, I can buy some paintings, not like the kind they have at the AGO, but I can buy like local artists and put them inside my home, and then I can wake up and I can see the art on my walls. If I'm a total jerk with no money, well, I mean, I'm only a total jerk to a few people. If I'm a total jerk with billions of dollars, then those billions of dollars would permit me to be a total jerk to a lot of people. So we have other episodes trying to answer the question of, well, how do you be a decent person? Like, how does one be a good man in the 21st century? So you can listen to the older episodes about that, but whatever character you have is independent of how much wealth you accumulate. Here, I am disagreeing with the idea that wealth necessarily corrupts, because like I said at the beginning, we human beings are the conscious, thinking, feeling, moral ones. Money, wealth, capital has no heart, no mind. They're just things we invented to make our lives better. And if your life is improved in the future because you've accumulated enough wealth, enough capital, that the capital makes money for you, and you don't have to make money for you any longer, then congratulations. You've won at capitalism, and without having to screw anyone over. Thank you so much for listening. At the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis, we're practical philosophers at heart. The kinds of ideas you just heard me talk about have been developed in conjunction with all of my private clients. If you're in a position to pay for private sessions, you can contact us at morpheusclinic.com. Just ask for a free consultation and, if it makes sense, a treatment plan, and we'd be happy to get started with you. If you aren't in a position to pay for private sessions, we do have other services as well. One is the Hypnu app, HYPNU, which you can find on Android in the Play Store and iOS in the App Store. We also have a number of group classes, most of which are live streamed internationally, and a membership program called the Self-Actualizers Club. For more episodes like this, follow us on YouTube at Morpheus Hypnosis, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Thank you.